the next generation of lifestyle awareness that will transform your life significantly. Hi, welcome to Living Wow Out Loud. I'm your host, Callie Ray, founder of the Living Wow Center and author of the book, 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me from Surviving to Thriving with Autoimmune Diseases. Living Wow is a lifestyle of choice and intention that was born from the truths that, number one, your body is designed to heal if you give it the environment to do so. Number two, you don't need a label or permission to be the expert in your own body. And number three, more than 80% of all diseases can be prevented or reversed by lifestyle. Unfortunately, this isn't what we're taught in our standard American diet and lifestyle culture. This podcast is a voice of hope and community where you will learn how to live a life of thriving that honors and embraces those three truths. Though you are an individual, you are not alone, and you can thrive living wow too. Welcome back to Living Wow Out Loud. I'm your host, Callie Ray, and today we are going to talk about bugs. The first thing that I think of when I think of bugs is ew, yuck, right? Most people don't like bugs, but today we're going to talk specifically about the microbiome, the bugs that live in, on, and around us. Before we get started, I want to do a little bit of a how we got here and why we're talking about bugs, because again, it's not something that most people have a natural affinity to. There's two different things that I want to talk about to get us there before we actually address the microbiome. So the first is why we're going to talk about it, and that is that underlying principle of living well, the principle that your body is innately designed to heal if you give it the environment to do so. So remember, maybe you get a paper cut, and that's just a really simple minor injury that we've all experienced, and it hurts. And so you might, oh, dang, that hurt. And then you don't really do much. Usually when you have a paper cut, you're not in a situation where you can, take a lot of time to take care of it. And so you might just clean it off. And if you do have a Band-Aid around, you might put it on there. But generally, it's not something that takes a lot of intervention because it's just really minor. But a few days later, you look and all of a sudden your finger is healed and you may not even remember that you had the cut. That is a simple example of your body having that innate ability to know that it's had an injury, and we're going to send in the repair crew and they're going to rebuild that tissue and knit it together and heal and be perfect as in sensation. Everything's working fine. So that's an example of how our body just takes over. It doesn't even need any support from us other than a clean environment, right? So that is that underlying principle of the environment that we create for our body. The second thing is our belief system and understanding of how our body operates. So I think back about every 10 years, we have some big new scientific discovery. And so I think back to the 90s, which was the first one that really impacted me and that I was a part of. Because I was in graduate school at that time and my studies were of the brain and brain injury, specifically how to recover from a brain injury. And so originally, and ironically, when I started my studies and in high school, I had been taught that the central nervous system was a hardwired system, and you had a certain amount of cells that you were born with, and that's what you had. And if they were damaged or diseased, you're out of luck. You got what you got. And once they were spent, it was done. Well, what we started to realize when imaging became a thing and we could more specifically understand and visualize and image what was happening in the brain, we started to understand that there were parts of the brain or cells in the brain that were less used. We could re-network these pathways. We could support and enhance and strengthen. We could like speed up different pathways, or we could change a pathway. And so we called that neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity really kind of took our previous beliefs and put them on their head, pun intended, because we really, initially, we thought it was this very set system. And now we realize it's a very plastic system. We can manipulate it. We can increase it. We can change it. We can support it. So that was the first thing that, the first big scientific change that happened in our belief system and in the way we then approached brain injury and brain injury rehabilitation. And from that, now we've gotten all sorts of prevention and more understanding about how we can take care of our brains. So fast forward, on the heels of that neuroplasticity came a new understanding. And this one I actually wrote about in 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me, because it was really becoming more common and being delivered to the medical community and eventually to our general community as a whole. And that's the Human Genome Project. So the Human Genome Project was looking at our chromosomes and understanding, again, prior to the Human Genome Project, the understanding of our genetics was our DNA. And so your DNA was it was your code of life. And it's what determined your gender, your hair color, your skin color, your family history. So this term of "it runs in my family" was very much that belief system that we would know what was coming down the pike based on what our parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, our family history. The Human Genome Project mapped out each chromosome. Now we understand this chromosome is responsible for this function, and this chromosome is responsible for this function. And it's much more complex than what we thought this original DNA molecule to be, right? So now the study of epigenetics came out of that. And what was learned was that on these chromosomes, we have these different genetic, I've heard it described like levers or switches that we can either turn on or turn off. So yes, it is true that we have this genetic predisposition, but we learned that 80% of our what turns on and turns off in that DNA code, right, that we thought was so set and hardwired, is actually dependent on lifestyle choices. And so this was exciting for me as I was coming into my transformation, because I had this health history that was pretty abysmal. My dad and my granddad had both died of massive heart attacks. My dad and my brother both very young. So my dad was 56. My brother was 42. So as I'm aging into my 40s and I'm looking at this history, and I had already been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at age 25, which at that time I thought, oh, I'm too young for arthritis. What? That can't be. And then they said, well, it's rheumatoid arthritis. I was, oh, okay. Well, my mom and my grandma had rheumatoid arthritis. So of course I have rheumatoid arthritis. That was my mindset. And at that time, it was called a degenerative disease because it doesn't kill you. It just progresses as you get older. The term autoimmune was not tied to rheumatoid arthritis until later. The study of the epigenetics was very timely for me because it gave me hope. It gave me an opportunity to go, oh my gosh, I can change my lifestyle and I can create a different "it runs in my family" for my kids. We had the heart disease, we had diabetes on both sides of my family. I realized, hey, maybe it's because of the lifestyle that our family lives, in addition to this predisposition that's causing that. So if I change my lifestyle, I react differently, or I make different choices, maybe I can slow this down, or maybe I can even eliminate it. So pretty exciting news and timing in my situation. And so that's where that genetics are not your destiny chapter and lesson in 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me came from. So that was very timely and very relevant to me at that time. And so now fast forward to the current time we're in, and we have yet a third belief and understanding scientific studies. So this third change in our understanding and belief of our bodies and our systems and the way they work is what is known as the microbiome. So micro meaning tiny, microscopic, you can't see it, and biome meaning home. So this is the study of the microorganisms in, on, and around us and how they interplay with us, with our body, with our systems, and ultimately with our health. And I think originally our old belief system came out of that time where bugs are bad and that kind of normal ew response to bugs. So when I use the term bugs, of course, I'm talking about any little creepy crawly thing, but these are micro bugs. You can't see them. And so that adds a layer of ew. I don't know. When I can't see something, it makes it even more gross because you see it under a microscope. Like, wow, that's really interesting. So with the discovery of antibiotics, we had a problem. There's a bacteria, pneumonia. We'll use pneumonia as an example. So you get pneumonia, that can be fatal. So it can be a very serious infection. And then you take an antibiotic and, in 7 to 10 days, you feel amazing and you're better. And it's a miracle. And so, of course, anytime someone gets any kinds of symptoms that are uncomfortable, or, we have a fever, we have chills, which chills come with a fever. We have pain, aches, that also can come with a fever. We have swollen lymph nodes or tonsils. We have a sore throat or redness and irritation, right? All of those are indicative of an infection. Those are all things that your immune response puts out to bring in the troops and get rid of this foreign body. So none of them are very comfortable, and they all are an indication of an infection. So we just go to the doctor and say, I have an infection. Can I have an antibiotic? And your doctor says, you have an infection. Here's your antibiotic. And so it worked until it didn't. And what happened was that we started to feel better. And so we would stop taking them, or we would give them to our friends or family who had similar symptoms so that they didn't have to go to the doctor, or so that they could have that relief and not have to worry about it. We also started using it too much on everything. So we would go in and have a certain set of symptoms. And so we would just get this broad spectrum antibiotic that would kill everything. Just by the sheer name, antibiotic means kill biota and microorganisms. And so it doesn't just kill a specific bug, it kills all the bugs. So it's kind of like when you put weed killer on your grass. It doesn't just kill the one type of weed, it kills 70 kinds of weeds. And there's a problem with that, because what happens is these are microorganisms and they morph and change just like we do, right? They adapt. And so they become more and more virulent. They become able to stand up and survive this attack. And in the meantime, you've got these few bugs that are really resilient and are still surviving. And as a result, they're very strong and they can create a lot of havoc. And your immune response it becomes very taxed. So we create this perfect storm, and that's what happens. So if you were in the medical community, especially hospitals and nursing care, anything where you have very sick people who are on many medications and they're kind of housed together, it was a perfect storm, and it became a very big problem. And so they started to kind of backpedal a little bit and say, wait a second, we've got these super bugs. And so what used to just be a sniffle or a problem that could be even waited out, because we realized, gosh, we're getting antibiotics for viruses, and they're not effective on viruses. So it was all of this kind of secondary damage. My husband would call it shrapnel, right? So you have the bullet, and then you have the casing of the bullet, and then all of the different things that it hit that fly off the impact, and it's all that extra damage that came from those antibiotics that was so dangerous and kind of got us to where we are today, which is still kind of pulling back. Like if you go to the doctor today to get an antibiotic, they're probably going to culture it, hopefully, to see what exact antibiotic you need. Or they may even say it's viral. Let's just let it run its course. It'll take 3 to 7 days and the virus is usually gone. Let your immune system do it. So it's learning to listen to our body and not run to the doctor on that first set of symptoms, or run even to the medicine chest, grab out your fever reducer and your pain reliever, because that's suppressing your immune system. Anything that we do that is killing off the biota, we are now kind of understanding some of the ramifications of that. I think back to a cycle that I was in that lasted about 4 years. It was miserable. So I would get this, usually it started with a sinus infection or some sort of drainage. It didn't even have to be an infection. It would turn into a staph infection on my face, bronchial, usually a bronchitis that would last. So it would kind of go through my system. It just morphed. It went from one thing to another. So I literally had standing prescriptions for antibiotics that I didn't even have to go to the doctor because I had it so often. The doctor just said, here's your prescription. You just have to go to the pharmacy and fill it when you need it. You just take it when you need it. And then I would have these yeast infections that were just raging and would not settle down. And my doctor was like, I don't know why you're having all of these infections. We thought maybe it was related to birth control. Maybe it was related to hormones in my age. Maybe it was related to stress. But I would just have these crazy yeast infections that wouldn't go away. And so I had also a standing prescription for antifungals that you take when you have these symptoms. You go to the doctor, or you don't have to even go to the doctor. You just go to the pharmacy and get your prescription because you've already had it and had it so much. And then the third piece of this cycle was these crazy rashes I would get, and breakouts on my skin, lesions, and it was mostly rashes. And the doctors would literally shake their head and look at me and go, I don't know what it is. Yeah, you've got a rash. It wasn't an allergic reaction to anything. Sometimes they would be hot and angry, and sometimes they would just be itchy, and sometimes they'd be nothing. They were just like bumps. And so again, they would always prescribe steroids because that rash was kind of a hyper immune response. And so put some steroids on it, a steroid cream, and it's going to take care of your rash. And so I had this cocktail of antibiotics and antifungals and steroids at my disposal that I was able to use and manage however I felt necessary based on my symptoms. And now I look at that and I'm horrified. And I realized that that's exactly what was happening. Was I was completely thrashing my biome. And I didn't really, at that time, I had no awareness. I was just doing what everybody was doing, and I'm doing what my doctor was telling me to do. So it kind of started to change, and my understanding of the microbiome started to change as I was coming into this transformation. And I had learned about the biome of the skin. And that was actually kind of the precursor to all of it. Like I said, there's about a 10-year delay in what's happening kind of in our world and what's happening in society. So the superbugs were really starting to take notice. They were starting to affect our daily practice in the medical setting because it was a problem and they were trying to figure out how to solve it. And then the epigenetic stuff, we were starting to realize how much environment mattered, lifestyle mattered, the choices we make mattered. We were starting to appreciate that a little bit more. And then I was going down this alternative healing path because I'd had no success with the allopathic Western medicine. I was trapped in this cycle, and I was really frustrated in this cycle. I was also about 70 pounds overweight. So I had that piece of it too. So the fatigue, the weight, the stress, the sad. That's what sad is, right? It's just normal. It's not normal, folks, but that's what our belief systems were. So I learned about the acid mantle, and it is this layer on our skin. And that's where the biota of our skin reside. And it's our protection. It's kind of like your armor. And so when we put skincare products, toxic chemicals on our skin, we are destroying those biota. Just like antibiotics, we think of that as a pill, right? But there's also antibacterial hand soap, hand sanitizer. We really saw this during COVID. It became the end all be all. And guess what, folks? It's a virus. But these cleaning products and these sanitizers aren't just antibacterial. They're antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. They're multibiota effective. So it's basically like just spraying napalm and just fire on everything. It's killing everything. It's killing everything good and everything bad. And so when I started to learn about this and how the skin is our outer defense against the world, and we always, everywhere, are these bacteria. So there's staphylococcus everywhere. There's streptococcus everywhere. Those are two that are probably the most recognizable and most common. And if you have staph or strep, they can be very debilitating. I've had both as an infection in my body, but they're everywhere. So how can it be that sometimes it's really bad for us and other times it's completely harmless? Well, it's because our system is either set up to protect us against it or is defeated so that it's opportunistic and takes over and gets out of balance. So some of the things that we're starting to learn about the microbiome, that was the first thing I learned. And I got a little radical, I will admit. And I still, to this day, this is what I vet my cosmetics or my skincare through is, can I eat it? Can I put it in my mouth? Because if I can put it in my mouth, your skin is your biggest organ and it absorbs through your skin into your tissues, into your blood eventually. And so it's no different than me ingesting it and having it go into my system and eventually getting into my blood. So it's going to go through the cells either way, whether it goes in through the skin or whether it goes in through the mouth. So I just want to make sure it's safe. And if it's safe enough for me to ingest, which usually means it's some sort of herbal product or like an essential oil, a lot of the plant-based oils, those kinds of things, but in their pure, unrefined forms as much as possible, because I can eat it. I can eat it as a plant. Then I can put it on my body. I've come to my own skincare based on those kinds of rules. And now I was shopping for some sunscreen with my daughter and found something that actually had on the label biome friendly. And I thought, yay, it's starting to surface in the mainstream, the importance of our biota, and not just our gut biota, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it starts at the skin. If we can be careful about the things we're putting on our skin, I really prefer soap and water. Anytime I can wash my hands with water, I'm going to be using it. I work in the medical field. So I come from this background of just assuming, we call it universal precautions. You just assume that everybody is contagious with something. And so you protect against that. This is why it's such a problem in the hospitals. One of the ways they protect against that is they constantly are lathering up with hand sanitizer, which again breaks down your defenses and makes you more susceptible because there's nothing there to protect you because your skin is thrashed. So if you can use soap and water, which 90% of the time I can, but 10% I can't. And so then when I can't, I use more sensitive types of products that still that still clean and support, but don't they're more targeted, kind of like a targeted antibiotic for a specific infection rather than a broad base. One of the saddest things I think back now, preschools, when I was a kid, we would line up at the sink and wash our hands and get a drink and go sit down at our snack table. And now we just sit them all down and walk by and go, everybody gets a squirt of hand sanitizer, and they lather these kids up in it. And it's awful for their immune system. It's really, really awful. So, if you're doing that, please stop. Please do a little bit of research about why that is so toxic for their nervous system and for their biome. So it's really, really toxic. Don't be slathering your babies with hand sanitizer. That's a whole different topic, but it's very, very closely related. The reason we're doing it is because we think we're protecting them against bacteria, but let their biome protect them from bacteria. Let their bodies protect them, because their bodies are designed to protect them if we stop sabotaging that environment. So moving on, the next was really the gut biome. And that's what we're seeing a lot of really cool research coming out as far as exactly what are the biota and where are they living and what's their purpose? How can we best balance them? And one of the things I think is so fascinating is the individuality of our microbiome. So it's like our fingerprint. Not a single one is alike, which makes sense if you think about it, because we are this creation, all these different similarities, but yet differences, right? So we have our DNA, which gives us our genetic map, but then we have our environment that we live in. We have our home. We have our community. And of course, just like anything else, we have different bugs here in Idaho than we have in California. We have different bugs in California than we have in Missouri, right? So it makes sense that our microorganisms would also be diverse depending on where we live, right? Our actual external ecological setting. But then we also have our personalities, right? Our stress and our mood, our hormones, our gender. All of these things have an impact on our microbiome. So every single one is individual, which is so cool, which also supports the need in our Living Wow system to recognize that you need to be the expert in your body, because only you know what's happening in your body, how you're feeling, if it's off, if it's on. So I encourage you, rather than when you have a fever or you have even something as simple as a headache, I think we really quickly run to the fever reducer or the pain reliever to get rid of that symptom so that we can just keep doing what we're doing. I'm going to caution you, and I'm going to challenge you to stop and pause. Not necessarily not do it, but pause and take a beat with your body and say, okay, what are you trying to tell me? Do I need to rest? What have I eaten? Maybe I haven't eaten. What just happened in the last day to 3 days? Kind of take a little inventory and see if you can figure out, what is your body trying to tell you, rather than rushing to mask a symptom, to answer a symptom. And I have a headache, I'm going to take a pill. I have a fever, I'm going to take a pill. I'm tired, I'm going to drink a coffee. I'm going to have an energy drink. Instead of having this cause and response, what if we pause and see if we can maybe connect a couple of dots? And maybe we're dehydrated and that's why we have a headache. Maybe we need to drink some water. Maybe we just had some really devastating news and our stress is through the roof. We're not breathing and our tension is just so tight. And so it triggered a migraine that you didn't connect the dots, but your body's saying, I need to shut down. I need to rest. And so then you listen to your body and then it takes care of it, kind of like the paper cut. It heals it on its own. But the problem is, in our current sad culture, we don't pause long enough for that paper cut to heal, long enough for that headache to go away on its own, like to actually not necessarily go away on its own, but to modify our environment and modify what we're doing in our body to give it time to heal. So that's just a quick and really simple example, just like the paper cut, of where we rush to get rid of a symptom when that symptom is actually our body telling us something that needs to be aligned, something that needs to be addressed. And so if we can kind of take a second to think about it and do a little inventory rather than just pushing on through it and ignoring it. And then what happens when we push on through it and ignore it, as soon as that medication wears off, or we didn't take any medication, we just keep pushing through, but we haven't changed the environment or our behavior, it just gets worse and worse, and it screams louder and louder. And I can say this because I guilty as charged. Absolutely. I mean, I did that for 20 years. For 20 years, I self-medicated, I doctor medicated, I pushed through, I ignored symptoms because I didn't have time for this, or I didn't have money for this, or I just, whatever, fill in the blank. I know I'm not alone. I felt like I was alone, but I know I'm not. I know you do it too. And so I don't anymore. I use those symptoms as a wake up. What's going on? Let's do a little bit of inventory. So some of the things we're learning about the gut is, we thought digestion, right? It goes in the mouth, it comes out the other end. And it's this closed system. It goes all the way through our body. It serves to take on nutrients and distribute them throughout the body, metabolize to nourish, and then get rid of whatever leftover waste we haven't used. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty cut and dried. Well, now we are recognizing, whoa, it's way more complicated than that because of these biota. And there are trillions of them, which is a mind-blowing number for me. Can't really wrap my brain around it. So in my mind, it's just they're everywhere. They're in every part of our body, and every part has a different function. And that's what the research is starting to kind of determine. They're starting to figure out, okay, this biota is found in this part of your intestine and it serves this purpose. And this biota is found in your colon and it does this. And this is found in your mouth. We're starting to identify and know what some of them do. A fraction, a small fraction. But just like with the epigenetics and the Human Genome Project, as we start to take the layers off, we start to get some answers and they make sense. Because again, thinking back to the neuroplasticity, we could image the brain so we could understand how it was working a little bit more. And then the human genome, being able to have the technology to understand it and to determine these things opened up so many doors. And it's the same way with the biome. And we're starting to understand and name different kinds of bacteria, different kinds of biota. And we now realize that not all viruses are bad. Not all bacteria are bad. Not all fungus are bad. All of the things that we have worked so hard to get out of our bodies serve a purpose. And sometimes that purpose is we eat something, then it feeds them, and then their waste actually triggers our hormones that gives our brain the signal to be happy. It's that fundamental and it's that complicated, but yet it's that simple. So the simplicity for me that I've taken away from this is be nice to spiders. If you remember the childhood show of Charlotte's Web, I apologize if you're outside the United States, you may not have heard of it, or if you are, my millennials know about it, but if you're a Gen Zer, you may not even be familiar with Charlotte's Web. So I apologize if I'm using a dated and not universal description, but it's a fun child movie and book. And actually the movie is from the book. But it is a story of a farm. And these farm animals all have a role. And Wilbur is this little piglet. And the animals tell him that his role is to be dinner. And, how devastating that would be to find out that the reason that they have you is so that you can grow up and be butchered and be their dinner. And so this spider, Charlotte, befriends and advocates for Wilbur. And she builds these beautiful spider webs, and inside of them, she puts these words that are affirming and beautiful and awesome and kind, and all of these words that describe Wilbur. And of course, this is unique. Spiders don't build webs that have words in them. And so Wilbur becomes a star. Everybody in the community, he goes to the fair and she puts these great words inside the web, and he becomes a star, and he doesn't get eaten. It saves his life because no one can butcher the amazing pig, right? Charlotte becomes the hero that saves Wilbur's life because she advocates for him and befriends him. My term that I use for the microbiome is be nice to spiders. There's a purpose. And even though, my first response when I see a spider is, especially if it's in my house, in close proximity to me. If it's outside in the garden, they're serving their purpose. And I have to remember, I have that same type of situation in my body. So I don't exterminate. I don't exterminate at my house because it's just a bigger example of what's happening inside of me. And so understanding and recognizing that they serve a purpose. And my purpose is to be a gracious host and to allow them to work together and to advocate for me and to keep the bad bugs, because there are bad bugs, to keep them in check. And there's a few things that we do that really sabotage that, especially for our autoimmune community. And one of those is, the one that we all do is slathering up with the antibacterials, right? Whether it's antibacterial soap, whether it's cleaning products. And now I'm even seeing antibacterial toothpaste. No, people, please don't. I came to my awareness of my oral microbiome organically, like I did with my skin, because my skin was kind of a weak point where I was getting thrown off balance and being put into these infections. And I was in a medical environment. So I was doing a lot of antibacterial everything. And I live in a world of let's clean everything to the nth degree so that it's a clean environment. And there's nothing wrong with a clean environment, but there's value in dirt. There's value in bugs. So I learned about the skin to protect myself. And then when I had my diagnosis of oral lichen planus, my mouth has always been important to me. I mean, I'm a speech therapist, so I know a lot about the mouth. I use it a lot. I'm a talker. And I've always been really sensitive to mouth sores. So if I had any kind of anything in my mouth, like I'd bite my tongue or I'd go to the dentist and I would always have canker sores. So every little kind of scratch or insult in my mouth would turn into a raging canker sore. And it would just be so painful. And I had them frequently. And then I realized that my toothpaste was part of the problem. And so I changed and I had 3 different kinds of toothpaste. If anything had some sort of total, regardless of the name brand, that was one of the things that if it had that, I would just instantly break out. Also, whitener was another one that would always kind of set me off as well. So I just got really sensitive to it and talked to my doctor. And I started, as I was researching, finding out fluoride had some, not so awesome side effects. Just like when I said no to the medications for my lupus, because I knew the toxic side effects in comparison to the expected benefits weren't necessarily something I was willing to do. Kind of the same with my mouth. And, I talked to my dentist about it and they would just, no, all the metal in your mouth is fine. I had a lot of metal fillings, all of the sores, they're unrelated. The same kind of things that my doctors would tell me with the bacterial, fungal, rash cycle I was in. It was the same thing in my mouth. Nobody had any answers. I was studying more about the biome and specifically thought, wait a second, we've got bugs in our mouth too. And I'm killing those bugs off with all these chemicals in my fluoride toothpaste. So what about non-fluoridated toothpaste? So I kind of looked at that and went down that road and things got a little bit better. And then, as I am, a little bit extreme, a little bit radical, I thought, what balances my skin? What if I use some of those same natural things essential oils. Coconut oil works really, really well for my body. So it's a great carrier oil for me. So I started a toothpaste that was a charcoal bentonite clay, and I had healing. And I didn't have any canker sores. And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm onto something. And so then that kind of morphed into creating my own. So again, looking at my body, my microbiome, my needs, listening to the symptoms and watching what was happening, I haven't had any kind of dental breakout. My lichen planus has calmed down. My last 3 years at my hygienist, blown away. Every single time I go, they say it looks better than it ever has. I've been probably fluoride free for about 3 years and probably commercial toothpaste free for probably a year and a half, 2 years. It's a little wow, but it's worth it for me because my biome is happy. It's balanced. It's taking care of itself. So all of the things when I'm out of balance are resolved. So again, that's my example. Yours may not be the same because your biome is different, but just another place to think about and go, hey, the products that we're using in our sad culture and that are available at every grocery store or online through Amazon are not necessarily friendly to our microbiota. And as a result, if we are killing them off or we're not feeding them what they need to be fed, we end up with things like allergic reactions. We end up with infections. And the last thing that's really important for those of us with autoimmune disease are those medications that they prescribe for us to stop that hyperactive immune response. Steroids. It's almost always some kind of steroid, and that suppresses the immune system. That's why they call them immune suppressants. So if we are suppressing our immune system, we cannot possibly have a balanced biota because the bad bugs have no checks and balances. It's so important that we create this environment of support. Be a good host. Make sure that you are listening to your symptoms and going, okay, whatever I just ate made my biota angry. Maybe your digestion is slowed. So you're constipated, or maybe the opposite. It's just going straight through you. Again, I can give these examples because I have lived it. And I know sometimes I get very frustrated and I'm like, oh, what's going on? But almost always, without exception, if I cut out processed food, because what does processed food always have in it? Always, it has some sort of preservative. And what is a preservative? A preservative is an anti-biota, right? Because it's preserving the food against rot and deterioration. It's making it shelf stable so it can last longer. So when they put it in the package to make it sit on the shelf at the grocery store or be able to come in transit to you through the mail, it has some sort of preservative in it. And that preservative is a form of an antibiotic, if you will. Okay. It's an antimicrobial, anti-something. It's making it so that it doesn't rot. I love the quote by Mitra Ray. I heard this, a long time ago. And Mitra said, if no self-respecting bacteria would eat it, why should I? Because if you're putting that in a food to keep a bacteria from eating it, then we probably should take pause and recognize that if it's not good for a bacteria, it's also not good for us. I love that. So that's the first thing, is recognizing that it's in our food if you're eating processed food. It's also in your food if you're eating things that have herbicides and pesticides on them, right? Which everything does. So moral of the story is you can't avoid it, clean it. And clean it with water or vinegar. Don't clean it with more chemicals because more chemicals are defeating the purpose. If the bugs in the yard can survive with it, there's a pretty good chance that your body can survive with it. So just try to clean with water, with vinegar, with oils, as opposed to with chemicals and herbicides and pesticides and preservatives. Salt is another really good natural preservative. Sugar is a natural preservative. All of those things, again, I just think, is it something I can eat? I clean with vinegar and baking soda like nobody's business. That is my primary. Sometimes I'll throw some essential oils in there as well, especially like lemon. Lemon oil is a really good cleaner. But they're all very, very eco-friendly, to use a term. Eco-friendly means biome friendly. That's where in your day-to-day environment, your physical environment, but then take a pause before you run to the medicine chest or the doctor to mask a symptom or to eliminate a pain or a fever or something that's telling you your body needs some adjustment. Then finally, be aware of the medications you're taking and how they're impacting your cycle in your body. Are you creating a dysbiosis in your body, which is resulting in the disease itself? Those are some things to take into consideration. And I by no means am an expert, but I definitely am an expert in my body. And I am familiar with the overall trends and the science that's coming out about these kinds of products. So if you want to learn a little bit more, I love the most recent and really interesting research about the biome is called Interconnected. And it's a docuseries. I love documentaries. I just think they're interesting. This one is about the microbiome, and not just the gut biome, but all of the different aspects of it. And it dives into some of the cutting research and some of the things that we're starting to understand and know. So I'm going to send you there. Also, functional medicine does a lot with the microbiome and using it as root cause to the disease rather than symptom management, as in Western or allopathic healthcare. And then holistic nutrition. That's actually where my start came from. As I got my nutrition certification, it kind of was the cherry on top to understand, how do I use this food as medicine, and how do I protect that biome and work together? Those are 3 places that you can get more information and dive a little deeper if you want to get nerdy about it like I did, and really understand and start to understand your own microbiome, all of the biota that are living in, on, and around us. So until next time, that will give you plenty to think about and work on for the next couple of weeks, as our episodes are coming out every other Thursday. So I'll see you in 2 weeks for our next episode. And until then, shine on. Hey, if you find value here on the Living Wow Out Loud podcast, will you please share it with your friends and take a minute to rate it on the platform that you're listening on? That's how we live wow out loud. You know that more people need hope and they need the messages shared. And that's how we get recognized among all the noise. This is where you find your voice. Will you please share and subscribe and rate so that we can grow?